Picture this. It's the 1850s, and you've been trekking for months across the Sahara. You're following whispers, rumors of a lost capital city. Well, that's exactly what a German explorer named Heinrich Barth was doing. He wasn't just searching for a place on a map, he was chasing a legend. But what he actually found was something far more haunting. So, let's get into it. The story of a superpower that, well, just vanished.
So what Barth was staring at were the ruins of Gao. This wasn't just any old city. This was the once mighty capital of the Songhai Empire. I mean, think about it. The very center of a civilization that basically controlled the world's gold trade. And now, just rubble. Just a pile of stones being slowly swallowed up by the West African bush. You can only imagine the sense of, wow, just overwhelming loss. And that, right there, is the huge mystery we're digging into. We're not talking about some small, forgotten kingdom here. The Songhai Empire was a global power. So how? How does an empire like that collapse so completely, so catastrophically, that it becomes little more than a whisper on the wind? All right, so to really understand the fall, you first have to appreciate the incredible heights they reached. I mean, how high did they climb before they fell? The empire was literally born and raised along the Niger River. You have to think of the Niger as the absolute lifeblood of West Africa, and controlling it gave them power and influence that was just unmatched. So, what was the engine of all this wealth? Well, it was their control over the crossroads of what was probably the most lucrative trade on Earth at the time. They were sitting right in the sweet spot. From the north, you had these giant slabs of salt coming out of Saharan mines, and salt was like white gold back then. They'd trade that salt for incredible amounts of actual gold coming up from the south. Being that middleman, that strategic position, it made them unbelievably, fabulously rich. But here's the thing. The Songhai weren't just rich in gold. They were rich in knowledge. The city of Timbuktu, it became this world-renowned intellectual hub. We're talking a city packed with libraries and universities, a place where a single book could literally be worth more than its weight in gold. This was a sophisticated, brilliant civilization, truly at its absolute zenith. And yet, you know how these stories go. Beneath all that shimmering gold and all those priceless books, a fatal flaw was starting to fester. The greatest threat to the Songhai Empire wasn't coming from the outside. Not at first, anyway. No, the rot, it started from within. Okay, so what was this killer flaw? Well, it was a massive political weakness. See, the empire had no clear, established rules for who got to be the next king. When the old one died, it was basically a free-for-all. And you can imagine, right? When you've got the most powerful throne in the region up for grabs, yeah, that is a recipe for absolute disaster. And just to give you an idea of the scale of this problem, get this. One of their greatest kings, a guy named Askia Muhammad, is said to have had over 37 sons. 37! You know, what should have been a sign of strength, of continuity, it became the exact opposite. It became a curse, because every single one of those sons was a potential rival for the throne. So when the old king finally died, the empire just descended into a meat grinder of a civil war. And the decay was so fast, we're talking just a few short years, where king after king was violently overthrown or straight up assassinated by their own family. All this chaos just hollowed out the government, it exhausted the army, and it left the entire empire dangerously exposed. And while all the Songhai princes were busy fighting each other for what was becoming a pretty tarnished crown, they were so distracted they failed to notice a new storm gathering on the horizon, a storm brewing to the north. And this storm carried something new, something terrifying, a technology that was about to change the rules of war forever. Now, the Songhai army was no joke. They were a formidable, traditional fighting force. We're talking tens of thousands of soldiers, with this core of 10,000 elite heavy cavalry. Picture it, iron armor, gleaming spears, massive swords. These guys had dominated the battlefields of West Africa for centuries. They were confident, they were powerful, they were the undisputed masters of the old way of war. But the invaders coming down from Morocco, they were a completely different story. A much smaller force, only about 4,000 men. But they brought something the Songhai had never really faced before: gunpowder. They were carrying these things called arquebuses. Think of them as early muskets, fire sticks, and they had powerful cannons. It was a deadly new technology that was about to make the old ways of war totally obsolete. So, this inevitable collision of two worlds, the old and the new, it all came to a head in 1591 at the Battle of Tondibi. This was it, the moment of truth, the day the spear would finally clash with the gun. And really, the outcome of this one battle would decide the fate of an entire empire.
Okay, so the Songhai army, which vastly outnumbered the Moroccans, had what they thought was a pretty clever plan. They gathered 1,000 cattle and drove them in a stampede straight towards the enemy lines. The idea was that the animals would soak up the first round of bullets and trample the invaders. But the plan backfired in the worst way possible. When the Moroccans fired their cannons and their guns, the thunderous roar, a sound these animals had never heard before, absolutely terrified them. The cattle panicked, turned around, and stampeded right back into the Songhai's own ranks.
In the absolute chaos that followed, the Moroccan musketeers just opened fire. The elite Songhai cavalry charged, just like they had done 100 times before. But their iron breastplates, the armor that had stopped swords and spears for generations, it was completely useless against lead bullets. The Songhai army, this incredible symbol of West African power, just broke. They fled. An entire era had just ended in a cloud of dust and gunpowder. The military defeat was total. But believe it or not, the tragedy that followed was even greater. The victorious Moroccan army marched on the great cities, on Gao and on Timbuktu. And they didn't just come for gold. It seems like they came to destroy an entire culture. Listen to this quote from a local writer, a chronicler named El-Sadi. He wrote, "I have witnessed the ruin of learning and its utter collapse." That just says it all, doesn't it? This wasn't just a battle lost. It was the utter collapse of knowledge itself. The invaders systematically, deliberately, dismantled the intellectual heart of West Africa. And here's the final, just heartbreaking blow. The libraries were looted, their priceless books burned. The city's greatest scholars, its finest minds, were put in chains and force-marched across the Sahara to Morocco. You see, the invaders didn't just steal the empire's gold, they stole its knowledge, they stole its future, they extinguished a beacon of civilization. And that brings us right back to where we started, with those lonely ruins in the desert. The story of the Songhai, it's this powerful, timeless reminder that internal division and a failure to adapt to a changing world can bring even the mightiest empires crashing down. And it leaves us with this final, kind of chilling question. When the battles are over and the books are burned, what's left? How long does it take for a great civilization to be forgotten, to become nothing more than a rumor whispered on the sand?